So it was a double transfer week for Celtic. Aaron Mooy and Mooy and Jenz joining Celtic. Celtic obviously played Legia Warsaw in the pre-season game, Arthur Burke's retirement game. That is all to come on the podcast today. No Alan Morrison today. The sun got to him, so it's just myself and Enda James. The Huddle Breakdown is with you just after this advertisement. This episode of the Huddle Breakdown is brought to you in association with the One Football app, your one-stop shop for all your football goodness. The One Football app is the best football app on the market right now. You can get your fixtures, your results, live scores, transfer news, squad updates, everything that you need on the team that you support is available now in the One Football app. The One Football app, you can subscribe to the team you support, and all of the stuff that you need on that team is available all in the one spot, and it's all completely free as well. So download the One Football app now using the link in the description below. Not only are you supporting the channel, supporting the Huddle Breakdown, you're also getting a top-notch football app as well. So use the link in the description below to download the One Football app now. No, so you're welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown season 3, episode 2, and a call here with you in the company of Enda.
You're breaking up a bit there, Enda.
Morrison. Have a Jen as well. It's in my eyes at the minute. Situation.
Don't say that, Ryan.
All right, let's try that again. James, can you hear me?
I can better.
There we go.
Your handsome face isn't quite sharp, but the audio is pretty good.
Well, listen, as long as the audio holds out, that's all we care about. For those who are wondering on the podcast what the hell happened, we tried to do an intro there, and it blurred out and just completely broke up on us. Enda James, Huddle Breakdown, Season 3, Episode 2. Some big talking points coming up in the podcast. Aaron Mooy is a boy, as you can see in the title. Mooy and Jenz also joins from League On, and we are going to be looking at some Legia Warsaw in the preseason. But the sunshine, is it hitting the US as hard as it's hitting the UK? As I mentioned in the intro, Alan Morrison is not with us because of the sunshine. Got a little bit too much lager.
Yeah, I've been there and done that. So, yeah, we wish Alan well and hopefully a speedy recovery. Get him back next week, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Big time. So I want to start with the double transfer. I will hold my fire on Aaron Mooy because I think that's the broader talking point. Mooy and Jenz, he is a player that was linked with Celtic last season as well. He was linked as a centre-back / right back. not the left centre back that we would have anticipated Celtic signing in the coming weeks. Maybe that's still to come. What are your general thoughts on Jens coming in this time around?
Yeah, I would say as long as he's considered depth to kind of replace the existing two center backs or supplant one of them. I mean, probably more realistically Starfelt, but then I think that's reasonable. But I think his profile is not that of a left-sided ball-playing center back for sure. He appears to be, kind of like Starfelt in the sense that a very accomplished defender, seems to be far better in the air, which I think would be a skill set that would certainly help us given some of our struggles in defending set pieces, etc. But yeah, he doesn't appear to be a player whose on the ball skill set is a strength, particularly. I mean, he doesn't look like a hammer thrower necessarily, but I keep thinking and saying that the standard here should be, Europa League last 8, and to be competitive in Champions League, hopefully to get into at least the 3rd slot to qualify for post Christmas Europa League. And he looks solid, but I'm not sure he raises the bar in that regard. And again, I think you can argue we needed some of that depth, given particularly if it looks like Julian's going to be out the door. But Alan and I have talked about it. I mean, and I won't speak for Alan, but one of my grave concerns has been our ability to build out from the back against better teams and playing the style in which it seems like Ange is going to be focused on, even in the Champions League. And I don't think Jens moves the needle in that regard. Are you there?
So I presume, yes, I am here. Sorry about the connection, but I wasn't sure if you had stopped talking or if I should butt in. So, like, he comes in. I don't think he is coming in as a starting centre back or a starting left-sided centre back. The structure of the deal is interesting. The structure of the two deals are interesting. Aaron Mooy obviously comes in on a free. Jens comes in on a season-long loan with an option to buy. Maybe Celtic would have been more keen on actually buying him if he came in last season. I think this seems to be 2 signings of convenience, 2 signings of a situation where Celtic have already spent quite a bit of money on 2 players that were here last season, and Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers. It doesn't seem like this is going to be Celtic's final business, judging on the structure of these 2 signings.
One would hope not. Towards the end of last season, as Alan and I will discuss areas of addressable need heading into this season, if this is it, then I think 3 out of the 4 that I laid out anyway, and I think there was a significant amount of overlap between Alan and I. Really, left back would have been the only one that we would have addressed if this is it. So that would be concerning. And again, the idea here is how do we get to the point where we're significantly competitive in Europe, and so that's my concern. Domestically, not so much. As with most of these guys, they're going to be fine domestically. It's more so in Europe where the major concerns come in. And he did play on the left side in France last season, a significant amount. I think the majority of his minutes were actually on the left side, but that didn't really go that well. If you look at his statistical profile, I mean, obviously the level of competition is higher than what he faced in Switzerland as well. So it's hard to kind of attribute how much was because of positional issues being on the left and how much of it was change in team. Both are kind of, both teams are kind of mid to lower table type sides in their respective leagues. So it's, again, it's hard to kind of disaggregate those things, but he definitely performed more poorly in France than he did, to a significant degree, than he did in Switzerland.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched him for the last number of years playing in France, but what I've heard and what I've read from people who are well sourced and much better equipped to talk about French footballers than me is that he was a bit of an average player in an average team when it comes to the situation he was in last season. So it will be interesting to see how he actually beds in. It's interesting what this means for the fate of Stephen Welsh as well as Julian, because I mean Julian is and should be out the door essentially. Where is Stephen Welsh coming into this now? Do you think this is the end of Stephen Welsh, or is this just another player coming in to be another backup?
It's a good question, because I think, as we saw in the game yesterday, what is today? Today is Thursday. Yes, yesterday.
Yes.
He brings something to that position that the others don't, which is that ability to break lines with passes. And Alan's talked about that pretty extensively, how over the last year, how much improvement we've seen in him under Ange in particular. So I think that's a good question. I think, there's been some defensive issues there. And obviously that's a huge concern, particularly as you go up into face European competition. So, I mean, if there could be improvement on the defensive side, I think he actually profiles better in that regard. I'm not sure on the left side. Again, you get back to these issues of guys being forced into playing in roles that may not be their optimized. Starfelt on the left, for example, not really playing to his strengths. It probably looks like Jenz is going to be similar in that regard. So, as we've talked about, the more you put these people in positions that aren't optimal, error rate goes up, turnovers go up. And as Ange has talked about, he's not real flexible in changing how he's going to play. His answer is do it better. Turn the ball over less is the answer. And I think, on the margin, when you put people in positions where they're less comfortable, you're going to have that as almost like a cost of friction. So yeah, I think Welsh to me is a guy who probably could do really well in another setting. I've said for a while now, I think in a kind of a right center back and a back three would almost be his ideal role. Kind of like, I don't know, your buddy Scales, right? Ripping him up at Aberdeen, you put him in a position and in a role that suits him in a side that makes sense, and all of a sudden he's flowering and playing. I mean, it was against lower league competition, but you take my point. I don't get the Jenz thing at right back. He played some right center back. Maybe he played a little bit of right back, but he's a pretty tall guy. He doesn't really profile as being all that pacey. So I suspect he's a pure center back.
Yeah, the conspiracy of him coming in to be an early replacement for Juranovic, who's eventually going to leave on deadline day, is probably
no way.
probably not correct. I wouldn't say.
No.
In terms of the squad build-up, and in terms of the current setup now with Jenz, and if Stephen Welsh, let's imagine Stephen Welsh stays. Over the last week, somehow I can imagine the conversations with Ange being, okay, we can get Jenz in on a free or on a loan, and we can also get Aaron Mooy in as a midfielder for free. And Ange probably said yes, because although there's a lot of conversation around what's an Ange player, do they suit the system, do they suit Ange ball? I would say Ange's idea of what suits Ange ball at the minute is getting as many bodies through the door that he feels are competent to do a job if called upon. For example, you don't want to be in the Champions League, have Starfelt out injured, have Stephen Welsh out injured, and suddenly have nobody there to play at left centre back. That's where I imagine the likes of Jenz coming in as backup to potentially even the backup to Starfelt, and Mooy being not the starter, but someone who Ange trusts to put in and do a job if necessary, if called upon in these situations. So that's where I sort of see the last transfers being the double transfers that came in, not people who are optimized for the club or optimized for Ange's system, but people that Ange will trust to put into the team for example, like last year, when we saw that he clearly did not trust Ideguchi to throw him in. That's where I sort of see Mooy being a player that Ange trusts to put in and be confident if he needs to be.
Yeah, I think you probably summarized my biggest concern as we head into the season, which is if you know, I think one of the hopes as we came out of the summer transfer window last season, which was understandably chaotic and challenging for a whole variety of reasons, and then I think the general consensus, including myself, was that January was a very positive step forward in that regard, not only getting it done early, but the quality of players coming in. But if you look at kind of the pattern, I'm a pattern recognition guy. So if you look at the pattern of what's gone on, you can kind of group these signings into three, I think, broad categories. One is players that were on an old list, right? Which Jenz even suits that. It's apparently from the reporting. Again, if the reporting's true, we'll even talk of him. I think Ange even said he was somebody that looked at last summer, and we know kind of if they looked at him last summer, that was coming off of an old list, as Starfelt was, and a bunch of the other players. And then there's the group of people Ange knows, right? Whether it's the Japanese contingent because of his direct experience in that league. There was the attempt at McCree, somebody he knew. Mooy fits that, obviously. So you've got that contingent. And then you've kind of got these, what I would call the more aspirational, hopeful picks, which were O'Reilly and Bernabe, which they kind of stick out because they do fit the system. They do present upside. They look like they're probably really good values. They're of a profile of youth and, kind of that nexus of sell on potential and really exciting talent, that kind of thing. The relative weighting of those is what I'm uncomfortable with. So ideally, you would have a lot more of the O'Reillys and the Bernabes than the old lists and guys the manager knows, right? Because what we know is historically now, with how far the industry has progressed, is that former two aren't good enough over time. That's not to say it's going to be, make or break this season, but there's only so many people a manager's going to know that meet the criteria. We're kind of running that well dry, probably to a degree, and so that's a concern. The other thing is, I think I did a thread on this on Twitter yesterday. I think it was. I still think that there's a general misunderstanding of the financial realities at Celtic by a lot in the support. Some of it has to do with understandable confusion about, the timing of cash being on the balance sheet at the club, because they get this huge influx of cash twice a year, basically. One is season ticket money. That makes the year-end statement look really flush with cash, the June 30th. So that's the season ticket renewal money. And then you get a lot of that European money in the fall, in the autumn, and that kind of replenishes the cash to a degree for that 12/31 statement. The problem is from January through May, before season ticket money really comes in, the club's pretty much burning cash because they've got all expenses and not a lot coming in, right? The reason why I get into this is people see those big numbers in cash and think, oh, they're flush with cash. Why aren't they spent? We got Champions League money coming in now and all this other stuff. And the reality is that, the last few years, the club was running at an operating deficit exclusive of player sales. So if we didn't sell Edouard last year in particular, or Ayer and both, basically you can think of it, Ayer and Christie funded the incomings, and Edouard basically allowed the club to operate at break even for the year, maybe make a little bit of money. Had we not sold Edouard, we would have operated at a deficit in the millions of pounds. So we're not selling anyone big, it looks like, this season. So that really kind of, yes, the Champions League money to a degree offsets that, but it's not like we have this endless pot of money and we've already spent a lot. And the idea that we're going to push much over 20 million, I think, is probably unrealistic. So I think that's all context for guys like Segrist, who, is not my ideal keeper. As much as I think he's a really good keeper, not a great fit for the way Celtic play. Mooy, really good player, aging, but we get him for free. Maybe he can fill a role as kind of a, and we'll get to that. I'd be interested in what your thoughts is there. I'm thinking probably as a backup to McGregor in that kind of ball distributing defensive midfield position. So I think that's kind of how contextually I'm seeing the window so far. And I think the simple question to ask is, how much have we improved the first 11? And, I think Alan's rightfully optimistic that with continued, focus on the system and guys getting bedded in like Hatate, and there's going to be some more, and guys, I would call like the development curve, their age group, they're going to continue to get better. So some of that's organically going to happen. But we're also heading into a European campaign where we're going to face significantly higher quality opponents. So I'm concerned that we haven't really significantly improved anything on the starting 11 with that, really difficult challenge confronting us in the Champions League.
Yeah, there's two things on that. I really like your contextualization of the transfers and the lists. I would agree with you to a large point. And then just to add on to your financial discussion there, I would say that is the key reason why there are lesser of the options one of the O'Reillys and the Bernabés, because there's not too many of them in the world, and the amount of them in the world are usually taken up very quickly by bigger clubs in the Premier League and not even used, and just there in their reserve squads or out on loan to another Premier League club or something like that. So it takes a longer time, I would say, for a club like Celtic to find, identify, and be able to acquire these type of players who have not already been snatched up by the City Group or someone else that have more money than us. Let's move on to Aaron Mooy then, because there is a comment that came in earlier on when I described Mooy as part of, probably a backup. Andrew Galaya, or I'm not sure how you say your name, but he said, I'm selling Mooy short. I would like to go on record and say that Aaron Mooy was actually one of my favourite players when he played for Huddersfield Town in terms of the lower ranked Premier League sides. He was a really, really good player. But what you want to think or, take into context is that Aaron Mooy at his peak was 2017, 2018, 2019. It's now 2022. He hasn't really been playing all that much because of his move to China, and because that move to China eventually ended with him essentially tearing up his contract. But there is value. Let's talk about the good parts about Aaron Mooy. He's a very good distributor of the ball. He's able to unlock defenses with his passes. That's in the data, and you can also see it with your eyes as well. He's an incredibly creative player. He has played in an attacking role, but with the older age, now at 32 in November, whenever it is, now shortly, probably going to drop back deeper. I see three different roles for him potentially in the Celtic team. That is, as the number 8, not really moving that much, but as a number 8 who plays against a team with a low block. So you have a second creative midfielder in there for passing, distribution, and trying to unlock defenses. I see him being a backup for Cal McGregor as the number 6, and just being very good at being able to control the pace of the game and being a generally good midfielder. And then the third role is a change in formation, which I mentioned last week, potentially with a 4-2-3-1 with Cal McGregor and Mooy in the midfield, with Hatate and O'Reilly and Turnbull, whoever that is. That's an incredibly creative midfield, which has defensive qualities and control qualities and attacking qualities as well. So I think it's a clever pickup from Celtic on the whole. And I think it is a short-term transfer. I think nobody would really argue with me in that one.
Yeah, I think the way that you characterize it makes sense relative to kind of a near baton replacement. If you want to think about it in the simplest terms, kind of a swap out for that role that he served last season. Callum McGregor is not 25 anymore. And we've talked about this. He's been flogged the last few seasons
he's not 25 anymore, and he was never 25 in football years either, because of the amount of football he was playing.
Yeah, exactly. So, depth is not only depth in the sense that if injuries should occur, and we've talked a lot about that problem last season, and I think that has to be proven that it's been addressed before I'll have confidence that that it's going to get better. So there's the injury risk, but then there's also just if you're going to address the injury risk, then you have to have the depth of quality, be able to play guys, every game. And this is an inherent problem in the league because of how tight it was last season, and I'm guessing probably will be again this season. Is at some point you got to be willing to sit a guy if his risks are up for pulling a hamstring or a quad or a calf, or he tweaks it in practice, or like we saw with Kyogo, playing in that St. Johnston game where he ended up rupturing his hamstring and having to have surgery and missing 3 months, right? That is, you got to be able to sit a guy. You can't be losing Callum McGregor for 3 months. And I think what Mooy does is he probably raises the floor, and gives you some of that flexibility, as you said. I mean, and I think, against 6, 7, maybe 8 teams in the league, even at an 8, he's probably okay. At a 6, I think he's going to be fine. Maybe even against 10, 11 teams in the league. That one, maybe not. And then, the issue's more so in Europe. And you tell me. I mean, just what I've looked at him on some film and stuff, he doesn't look like he was ever all that fast, and has, as is to be expected, he's probably lost a couple of steps based off of normal aging.
Yeah, he was never quick. Any player, any person who's watched him will tell you pace was never his strength. Is
right.
a kind of way of putting it.
Right. So what he might bring, because again, we Alan and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, McGregor is terrific in that role as a distributor, but he's not the most creative deep lying passer either. He, he'll almost default to the easy pass sometimes, and so Mooy might bring in again as a depth piece, or with McGregor, as you said, if the system shifts to the 4-2-3-1, might offer a little bit of that deep playmaking that we haven't seen a lot at Celtic outside of in Cham in 17-18. I mean, that's the last time that we've really had that kind of midfielder playing deep that can play those kind of passes. Hatate looks like he can do it if he's playing deeper. He does drop deep sometimes, but and I think with what we've seen with Ange's style of play is one of the frustrating parts for some of the forwards, particularly Maeda and Kyogo. And again, we've mentioned this in the past, is some of the runs that they make that appear to be, good runs that are open, and there's no one deep that can make the pass. McGregor made a great one on the goal, that brilliant goal yesterday with Hatate finishing it, but that was more in the final third than, that deep, really, from kind of your own half into just across the halfway line. So I think Mooy can add some value there. Again, I don't see him playing a meaningful role. Easy for me to say, meaningful role in making us better against Salzburg. This is why I asked about the pace issue, because how we, and we'll talk about preseason a little bit in a minute, but one of the things you've seen in preseason. I don't take preseason that seriously, but some of the issues in transition remain. Let's put it that way, and pace is a part of that. And I don't think Mooy against a Man City, a Liverpool, even a Shakhtar or Inter, not even that super high tier, but that next tier down, or even the next tier down. Having that space and not having the speed to be able to make up when there is space in transition. And because we don't have this, high functioning back five that's able to ping the ball around, Ange's answer to turning the ball over is, within the context of Hart playing that high, to me was a little alarming, which is don't turn the ball over. Well, I think that's probably not a realistic expectation given the players being put in the roles that they're being asked to play to a degree where they're going to be, like 99th percentile. They might get functional, but the dial on that gets turned as you go up against better teams that are faster, better coordinated with their press, and a degree of talent. You know, when you turn the ball over and it's Wirtz and Schick at Leverkusen that are on the other side of turning that ball over, that's different than it's, you know, Dundee.
Yeah. Fans are going to kill me here, but who was it that played the long ball over the top to Kyogo for the goal in the Europa League last year?
Well, Jota was deep and played that.
Jota. I
Yep.
That's who I thought it was, but it wasn't making sense in my head why Jota would be that deep. Mooy has that in his locker all day long, so that's where you're seeing potential there. If the likes of Maeda or Kyogo are making those runs, if Celtic are trying to escape from a high press, Mooy is someone you can trust to take. For example, like you were saying with the defense and being able to play under pressure, Mooy is definitely someone that you can put in and trust him to play under pressure, much more so than I would have said, you know, Beaton would be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Beaton was okay at that, but not, I would, you know, not high level. I mean, he was better than most of the other options that we had in playing those kind of passes, but I wouldn't say like high functioning. Like I said, Cham was really the last one that we had, and we rarely played him in that role after 17, 18 for some mysterious reason. But so yeah, this is where we go back to if and this is, you know, quote unquote Ange ball. Even if you go back to Marinos in the equivalent of the Asian Champions League, is if we're gonna play a guy like Mooy in that role, let's say McGregor gets hurt, God help us, and he has to fill in that role in the Champions League, you know, we'll probably score. I mean, I'm confident we're going to be able to score at that level, but we might have to win 5-4. You know what I mean? It's going to be, I don't see us being sound enough in midfield and defensively to be limiting chances at that level to a significant degree, because we just don't have the players. And you know, that's, yeah. So I'm not, again, any of these moves individually, I can kind of back into, oh, okay, well, I see a role. There's a degree of coherence here outside of Segrist. I don't get the Segrist signing at all. But outside of that, when all the rest of them, I can say, okay, well, from a depth perspective, it's when you take them all together and that they're not really addressing the biggest issues that we talked about in May heading into this window. I think that's where the issues reside.
Yeah, I think it's the long-term vision that people seem to really have an issue with. My question is, like in the long term, what really is Ange ball other than what he does himself with Celtic at the minute? Because managers evolve over the course of, and you know, there is evidence behind it, you know, with what he did with Australia and what he did with Marinos and teams that he previously managed. But I see a lot more pragmatism when it comes to Ange and Celtic, and maybe potentially that is because of the magnitude of job that he has to do in the Champions League with these players coming in. So maybe there is an argument to make that Mooy does suit Ange ball because Ange ball is getting in quality players who he trusts at the key moments of the season. Maybe we'll start to see a shift in that if Celtic get more money and are able to bring in more players like O'Reilly and have more time to scout these players. But that's all in the long-term system. In terms of where the squad is at the minute, so Celtic have pre-season ongoing at the minute. Legia Warsaw, the game last night was finished 2-2 as Artur Brooks' farewell party, essentially. It was almost like a testimonial. Finished 2-2. Celtic went 2-0 up before the game ended. Though this pre-season seems to be, I don't know, maybe it's just because we're in a bit of a bubble when it comes to Celtic Twitter. And I know there's a bombshell on Celtic Twitter today that we're not going to discuss.
Well,
but
and back to the comments on Alan. You know, people are pretty miserable right now too. I mean, living through a heat wave without air conditioning.
This is true.
You know, I had a period where, you know, I live in an area where like 40 degrees is normal during the summer, like, you know, by late June through August. it can be that hot regularly for extended periods. And I've had times when the air conditioning broke down, and trying to live in that is a misery. So I have some empathy for all of the people venting their misery on Twitter, and it translating into horrible takes on Celtic. But um,
Yeah.
I think that might be a contributing factor to how
Yeah.
horrible it's been the last few days.
Well, my overall point is that people are very miserable when it comes to pre-season. Just a quote from Ange over the last day or so about pre-season itself and the results and how the performances are going. He said that the point of the exercise is not to win games of football. The point of the exercise now is to prepare the team to win games of football. So I'd be very much in the camp of pre-season doesn't matter one jot. We saw the first team that Celtic put out. I know it was against, a very, 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 very bad side. But preseason, as we all know, is nonsense. It doesn't really tell you much at all when it comes to what happens in the season. Celtic were absolutely dreadful in preseason last year, and they went on to win the league. What we're seeing in this preseason is similar enough to last season in terms of what he's doing with Hart and different things. But one interesting point I do want to take from preseason is how much game time James Forrest is getting. James Forrest obviously extended his contract to keep him at the club. Are we going to see more of James Forrest this season? Is that what's going to happen if he stays fit? He was out injured for most of last season. So, is he going to play more?
Well, I think he'll play more because of availability issues. Hopefully he stays healthy. I would think he would be a kind of a super sub role would be the role that would make the most sense for him against most of the league, for example. Because again, I think it's intellectually everyone kind of already understands it, because we know when the World Cup is, we know how congested the fixture calendar is going to be, partly as a result of that. But when you get into the reality of that, and the games are just piling, thankfully this year, Wednesday, Saturday for the most part. Jota and Maeda and Abada cannot play every single game. And so not 90 minutes every single game. So for these guys to be able to be rested, and if you look at, I think we talked about this when Maeda was signed, if you look at his track record and the way he plays, for him to go at that kind of intensity for 90 minutes, it was not that common in his career in Japan. He usually would be subbed out at 60 minutes, 70 minutes, that kind of thing. So you're going to have to rotate guys. You're going to have subs coming in to give guys breaks, not only in games, but giving them rests and games off so that they can be the sub, or completely have some time off. And then you factor in injuries. I think there's a role for Forrest in that capacity to help alleviate some of those things. And again, as much as he's kind of slowed down a little bit, I know there's an element in the support that he drives absolutely berserk, and has been for probably his entire tenure. He still brings enough quality on the ball that if we're trying to get a goal late against a packed in Livingston at home or something like that, I think he's still good enough to be able to make a difference there. So that's kind of how I hope to see his role. I'd be shocked if he displaced any of those those three, in Jota, Maeda, and Abada, on kind of merit. But I've been surprised before.
I'll just give another example of how preseason is nonsense. Around this time last year, in preseason, before Kyogo came in, we were hypothesizing whether James Forrest would move into a striker role because
number 10,
Celtic were because Celtic were so short, and he seemed to be the only option that we had to go in there. So that'll tell you.
The one thing I'll push back a little bit on relative to preseason, and again, everything that you've said, and I think the spirit of what Ann said, I agree with. But I'm a worrywart, as you know, and the goal rate at which we conceded in Europe last season was alarming, at 2 to 2.5 goals per game, and we've conceded, again, that outside of that first game, which was, a lower league Austrian, a mid-table lower league Austrian side, in those other 4 games, and none of these teams were, high-level opponents. Vienna was, I think, either mid-table, maybe 4th, something like that, in that area in Austria. So good team, but a tier below the Midtjyllands, a tier below the Bodo Glimts even. And in those 4 games, we've conceded 9 goals. So now some of that was in the second half when you've got these guys coming in. But when I watched, even when more of the first team in the first halves, you see some of these issues. And again, Andrew's addressed it, turning the ball over, acres of space, transitions, and maybe it didn't culminate in a shot. But again, against Rangers or against the quality of teams that we're going to face in Champions League, you would expect opponents to be more merciless in those situations. So I'm still seeing more of that than I'm comfortable with. And, that's whether it's people getting more comfortable in their roles, things coming together, as Anne just talked about, they're working on things, they're seeing the improvement. I hope that's all the case. I'm still worried, given that we haven't really upgraded the personnel that addresses this issue. And it seems inherent to the way he wants to play that, it may be just something we have to live with, and we're going to have to try to win 4-3. But that's tough. Like, if you're playing in Europe and you've got to score 3 goals to win games or get results, that is a really tough path to getting out of a group or to qualify for Europa League. It'll be fun in ways, but and exciting, but really tough.
Yeah, I will say this, that Celtic were 2-0 up at halftime. 46th minute, Juranovic, Taylor, Turnbull, Ideguchi, Kyogo all come on. Ralston, Bernabei, O'Reilly, Hatate come off, and then that was followed by Bain coming on for Bain and Jota coming on, Hart, Nabata coming off. That doesn't happen in a real game. So I am as much as I'm a believer with the whole idea of not having too many left footers in your team, I'm a strong believer in the fact that preseason, it's not real. It doesn't exist. We shouldn't be getting worked up about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just, even in the first half, we gave up some chances that weren't bad chances that they happened not to score on. And again, they're not a great side. They're a decent side, but so that's more so. And again, it's back to what I was saying, kind of on the recruitment side, is in isolation, just that first half, you'd be like, it's preseason, who gives a crap, right? But within the context of the challenges that we've had in Europe under Ange, within the context of the rest of the preseason, within the context of the profiles of the players relative to the system against these quality of opponents, right? So that's why, in context, I think it raises a little bit of concern. I'm not saying a lot of concern. I'm just saying it's kind of in that same direction of travel, so to speak. And that's where I'm waiting to see evidence that it's being, improved upon. And we don't know. We're not going to know until we face, I don't remember, maybe our first Champions League game might precede the first derby. I forget, but they're pretty close in timing, I think, around a week or two. So we're really not going to know until we face that level of team. Because the other thing is that outside of Rangers, from what I've seen, the rest of the league hasn't done that much to get a lot better. A lot of incoherence still going on, a lot of crazy fun stuff in signings and manager
You wouldn't
turnover.
be talking about what happened Hibs over the last 24 hours, would you?
Well, that's even, again, a one-off, but David Marshall being, I mean, how you can go from Marciano as your starting keeper to David Marshall. I mean, it's like the upside down world, I mean, it's like, maybe they're completely changing the way they're going to play now. I don't know. But so, yeah, I don't see, I think the order, you'll get maybe some movement below Hearts in who comes back up and, creates more of a challenge. But the rest of the league, I don't think's done that much to get all that threatening. So again, it's really going to come down to, dropping points in horrible ways against teams that you shouldn't be. Who does that better and worse? And then, the heads up derbies, and then the Champions League. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. So that's why when I talk about all these things, that's what I'm, I focus a lot of the analytical time on, is trying to figure out where the relative pieces are going to fall. And I try to stay objective relative to Rangers, and my objective analysis so far is that they're not having a bad window, right? So they're I think just as likely to be better than they were last season. That's my base case, is that they will be better than they were last season. What they're doing so far, to me, seems like they're moving the ball forward a little bit, maybe not a lot, but in that direction. So that creates, a competitor that we've got to step up to. And, it was 4 points. Goal difference was huge, but as so little, even go back historically. This is why I wrote my first piece last year for the Celtic Way, was, basically the concept was back to the future, right? Back to when the league used to be, a goal here, a goal there, a result here, a result there, swung the pendulum. It's that tight. And I suspect that's what we're facing again. And they're not doing anything calamitous, that would say, oh, they're going to be, terrible this season, to create space there where we can get away with things. So we're going to have to be at our best, and, hopefully we're heading in that direction.
Not even the middle of July, and you're already got me worried for the season.
Well, you have to be. I mean, how can you not be? I mean, optimistic, but to me, it's kind of a coin flip kind of situation. And that's, I don't think we've made any changes to our team that are, tectonic plate shifting, so I think the existing regime from last season is probably similar. We'll get a little better, I think, based off of the stuff that Alan's talked about. I think they're going to be getting a little bit better. If they replace McGregor at keeper, I'll be even more worried, because that was a big thing for them last season. So yeah, we'll see. We
will see. 47 minutes in, and I think I've managed to just about hang on with my Wi-Fi, but I think it will.
Your connection's even better now. We should go for another hour now. Now you look at that pretty face of yours. Now we can see you clearly.
Nice and tanned from my sunshine of 36 degrees, but with a nice lake beside me, unlike the fine folks over in England and Scotland who are trying to do this without air conditioning. So my thoughts are with everybody who is struggling through the heat over the last couple of days and days to come, and to Alan Morrison as well, who is on his recovery, I will say, and he should be with us next week on the Huddle Breakdown as we continue on. We'll be just about a week outside of the new season next week, so that will be the discussion points for next week, and we'll be looking forward to the new season.
Looking forward to Saturday. Norwich, I think, will be, again, a different kind of challenge. I suspect, given the proximity to the first game next week, we'll get more of and basically a weeks of rest in between the games. That we'll see more of the first 11, what Ange expects to be the first 11 heading into the Aberdeen game. So I think we might get more out of Saturday than we would much of the rest of preseason. Hopefully, anyway.
Should be a good game to watch. I mean, Norwich are always a very pretty but very weak side when it comes to Premier League. They're always, I always say that they're a very nice side, but nice being a compliment and an insult at the same time, because they're always far too nice for their own good when it comes to the Premier League. But against Celtic, it should be a nice day, especially the sunshine.
Well, everyone enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who has commented, and thank you for sticking with us even with the bad connection. This will be available to podcast in the usual places, Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcast as well. It should be up on YouTube as well. If you missed the start and want to go back to the start, skip forward past the part where we had a false start because of my connection, and you'll get to the parts where
it was about 45 seconds, I think, for people that are on the iPod, on the podcast apps.
Yeah, but well, I'll cut it out for the podcast listeners.
Oh,
The
okay.
YouTube,
Wow.
YouTube chums will have to just skip forward themselves. As always, James, thanks very much.
Thanks, Enda. Stay cool.
All right. Yeah, we'll chat to you later. Good luck.